So now let's look at how this works in a word problem. First of all, this problem talks about a gear ratio. We know that a gear ratio is the driving gear to the driven gear. So let's start by putting that out here in front, and then we're going to make a box. It tells us that on a mixing machine is 6 to 1. Okay, so that order tells us that the driving gear is 6 and driven gear is 1. It's really telling us the driving gear is 6 times as big as the driven gear. And then it tells us the driven gear has 12 teeth. So it tells us the driven, so we're going to put that across from the driven, which is 12 here. And this is measured in teeth. And then it wants us to know how many teeth are on the driving gear. So here's our x. So we can use this to write our proportion. We just write 6 to 1 equals x over 12. Here's our first one, here's our second one. We'll cross multiply. 6 times 12 is 72 equals 1 times x, which is just x. So now we know that the driving gear has 72 teeth, and we need to label it, and word problems need to have a unit on the end. A pulley system. So we know that a pulley is larger to smaller. So we'll draw our little box that just helps us know where to put our numbers in. Has a pulley diameter ratio of 4. Now we talked about how ratios really need to have 2 numbers, but sometimes in word problems things get a little sloppy and they just give us 1. So when they give us 1, that 4 is the first number, and it would be over 1, because 4 divided by 1 is just 4, and that's how we just get 4. And then it goes on to tell us the larger pulley has a diameter of 15 inches. And then wants to know what's the diameter of the smaller pulley. So here's what we don't know. If the larger pulley is in inches, then the smaller pulley is in inches, because remember, ratios need to have the same units. So everything that's lined up and down should have the same units. So now we can write our proportion. 4 over 1 equals 15 over x. Cross multiply. 4 times x is 4x. 15 times 1 is 15. We'll divide both sides by 4. When we do that, we get 3.75. This is measured in inches, so our answer would be 3.75 inches. You should know that 0.75 is 3/4, so we could say 3 3/4 of an inch. The compression ratio of a classic Datsun 280Z is 8.3 to 1. Now remember that compression ratio is the expanded volume to the compressed volume. We have 8.3 to 1 to begin with. And then it says if the compressed volume is 36 cubic centimeters, what's the expanded volume? Now if this is in cubic centimeters, this will be in cubic centimeters. We can write our proportion. 8.3 over 1 equals x over 36. Cross multiply, so 8.3 times 36 is 298.8, and 1 times x is x. So our answer is 298.8 cubic centimeters. On a certain job, concrete is made using a volume ratio of 1 part cement to 2.5 parts sand to 4 parts gravel. So that actually is telling us about 3 different ingredients instead of 2. So let's look at what we want to know. How much sand should be mixed with 3 cubic feet of cement? So it's asking about sand and it's telling us about cement, so we want to use those 2 bits of information. So let's write that down over here, sand and cement. Make our box. So we need to find the part that goes with sand first. So here's the sand part, so 2.5. So we'd write that here. And then we want the part that goes with cement, and that's here. So it's 2.5 parts sand to 1 part cement, and the order that we wrote these two in doesn't really matter as long as we label it and keep track of where things are going. So it says here how much sand. That's what we don't know. We don't know the amount of sand. Should go with 3 cubic feet of cement. So 3 cubic feet of cement across from the cement. Now this cubic feet's important because that tells us what this one's going to be labeled in as well. It'll be in cubic feet also. So now we can set up a proportion. 2.5 over 1 equals x over 3. Remember 2.5 is the same thing as 2.5. So that probably is easier to type into our calculators when we cross multiply. 2.5 times 3 is 7.5, and then x times 1 is x. So we have 7.5 or 7.5 cubic feet of sand.